Welcome back everyone to my 6th devlog on the Necrotic Trials. It's been a while, but I'm pretty happy with the progress over the last couple months. And for those that are curious, I'll cover my opinion on the whole Unity controversy at the end of this video. Last video we talked game design, and now it's finally time to go into implementation. One thing this devlog has taught me is that although design is super fun, it can also become a trap. Sometimes you just need to build something to see if it works. However, before I dive into today's main topic, which is gathering souls, let's touch on some smaller updates. There are a ton of them, so bear with me as I speed through these. To start, I finally added different colored health bars for enemy and player units. The skill bar has also received a makeover, now displaying unit stats and featuring dedicated frames for common actions like movement and basic attacks. I also simplified the visuals when hovering over an ability. Now we show its range as an outline rather than a solid color. This is done by creating a bunch of meshes that separate the tiles that are affected by the ability from those that aren't. To ensure this doesn't bog down performance, I utilized Unity's pooling system, which is designed to handle numerous game objects efficiently. I also made major improvements to the ability system. To start, I've begun developing status effects, to add some variety to combat, as well as introducing nodes to manage these effects on units. Combining that with the new conditional system, we can create some pretty cool abilities so far. For example, if a target doesn't have a status effect, this ability will apply it. However, if the target already does have the status effect, this ability would instead deliver a critical hit, showcase a unique animation, and then remove that effect. I also added the option for abilities to rotate around a unit, as well as enemy clusters which allow for AoE attacks, such as this cleave ability. And as you just saw, we can also now spawn visual effects. Lastly, we can now tie the range of an ability to a stat, such as a movement stat determining the range of a movement ability. Next, let's talk about some dungeon changes. At the top of the screen, you'll see a bar indicating your current room within the domain. Rooms can be combat arenas, random events, which could either be beneficial or detrimental, rest areas, or boss battles. Once you defeat the boss, you'll transition into the next domain, which are randomized between each run. I will come back to this later on, as there are some noticeable problems with it. But now onto gathering souls. The favorites from last video were number 2 the blood gauge and number 4 the soul drop. There were also some amazing comments about other ideas I didn't even think about, such as the souls retaining characteristics of the creatures they originate from, or even a soul fragment system to craft souls with. The mechanic I settled on I'm quite excited about, but still let me know your thoughts on this, as it's a pretty big segue, even if it's negative. Feedback is one of the main reasons I decided to document this game on YouTube. First, I've made a tweak to the blood gauge, which is now rebranded as Life Essence. While its core functionality remains unchanged, its presentation has evolved from an orb to a more streamlined counter bar. This shift addresses the question, does Life Essence quantity need to be a large number? Such a high count could potentially clutter and complicate in-game decisions, and make balancing a nightmare. By transitioning to a counter bar, we've simplified the display to single-digit values, effectively sidestepping any issues with number bloat. The way it fills up will vary, maybe we can consume corpses, but for now I'm just thinking as a necromancer unit attacks, this gauge fills up, which keeps that main unit in combat and not just hiding in the back somewhere. Once the life essence is full, the necromancer can cast the soul reap ability, which will fracture the soul of a unit for the rest of the match. I'm not sure if I want to make this apply any debuffs or anything, but that could be an option for an upgrade. I'm also not the biggest fan of this skull. I was hoping to get a cool blue crack on the health bar or something, but I couldn't figure it out without making the health bar harder to read. I'll keep working on this. Once this unit dies, they will drop a soul fragment, akin to the unit's type. A melee unit will drop a red fragment, a magical or support unit will drop a blue fragment, and a ranged unit will drop a green fragment. You can think of these fragments as archetypes, with red focused on physical damage and defense, blue focused on magical damage and support, and green focused on ranged damage and dexterity. Most units will only drop one fragment, which is the one closely resembling its type. However, some more powerful units may drop more than one type as well. We can then craft these fragments into a soul, depending on which fragments are used. For example, By combining the melee tankiness of the red fragments with the support of the blue fragments, we get the Sword and Shield class. Now let me go over all the unit types I plan to have. Starting with the warrior archetype. Going all in with red gives us the Greatsword unit, focusing on heavy melee cleave damage. Mix in a bit of blue and instead we get the aforementioned Sword and Shield, which is kinda like a dark paladin. Throw in some green and boom, dual axes, which focus on quick flurries of attacks. Moving on to the mage archetype, stick to all blue and you get the tome unit, which will deal heavy magical damage. I want to stick away from pure support units, as those can get pretty overpowered if not balanced correctly. If you choose to add red, you get a staff. Not sure if this will be a melee staff imbued with magic or just a standard wizard vibe. And if you blend in some green, we get a wand. I haven't found this unit's specialty yet, so I'm open to any suggestions. And lastly, for the ranger archetypes. All green will give us the longbow, focusing on dealing damage as far away from the target as possible. Adding in some red will result in a crossbow, dealing heavy, massive critical damage at the cost of mobility and speed. And then adding green will give us a shortbow, focusing on dealing highly mobile, medium range damage imbued with a little bit of magic. And finally, if you combine one of each fragment type, you'll get dual daggers, which is the classic assassin stealthy class. These fragments can also enhance existing units as the main fragment sync once your team is created. I'm still weighing whether to opt in for a dynamic or static upgrade system. In a static setup, you'd use specific fragments matching the unit's original composition to boost related stats. Using the example from earlier, you can only upgrade a sword and shield unit with 2 red fragments and 1 blue fragment. On the other hand, a dynamic system would allow any fragment type to enhance a unit's attributes, irrespective of its original makeup. Imagine bolstering a tome unit's physical damage and health using red fragments. This approach could lead to intriguing gameplay possibilities. Want a greatsword that deals heavy magic damage? Sure. However, this flexibility could pose a significant balancing challenge, which isn't so important in roguelikes, but it does still matter. I don't want one unit to be significantly more powerful than the rest. Buildcraft is something I really want to focus on in this game. Each unit will have their own abilities. While I initially toyed with the idea of a skill tree system, I've opted for a more streamlined approach for the MVP. For those that have played Risk of Rain 2, players select the unit's abilities between runs, unlocking them as they progress. This design choice leans into the roguelike genre, where some progression is retained between runs, a direction I actually envisioned from the start. In order to ensure diverse gameplay with a limited set of abilities, I want to introduce an augment system. These will be unit-specific modifications ranging from stat changes to unique buffs, designed to foster intriguing combos and mechanics. Each unit can hold 4 augments, and duplicate augments can be combined to an upgraded version. I also thought about adding a relic system reminiscent of the relics in Slay the Spire, which offer team-wide buffs rather than unit-specific buffs. But I'm still brainstorming this. I just want to make sure there's ample depth in crafting strategies without the need of intricate skill trees. There is still one major design question I'm still brainstorming, so let me know your thoughts. Originally, I envisioned each room as a brief encounter, with several rooms per floor, which is what I implemented early on in the video. However, a concern arose. If players have to summon their entire army in every room, even if it's only like 5 to 7 units, it will become tedious very quickly. I already mentioned that I didn't want units to just automatically spawn when you enter a room, however that could be something to reconsider. You could also mix it up a little bit. What if, instead of multiple rooms, where you can choose upgrades between each room, each domain represents a vast labyrinth filled with traps, treasures, and a hidden boss chamber? Players could choose to divide their party if they choose to, or move as a single unit. This way, players would only need to summon their units once for each of the 7 domains, and of course when a unit dies. If I went with this approach, I could also look into the soul drop mechanic again, as the domain would really only end once you found the boss room. However, if the player overlooks a chest or soul early on, retracing their steps through turn-based navigation would be cumbersome. Plus, that unit would need to regroup before confronting the boss anyway. What are your thoughts on this? I see the merits in both of them, and I guess it really depends on what kind of game do I want to make. And lastly, there's a major bug I found. If an obstacle is larger than the unit's movement, while still being narrow, the tiles on the other side of the obstacle will not be considered blocked, even though the unit cannot move to it. If you try to, the unit will simply ignore the range restrictions. The reason for this is that the pathfinding operates on the global grid, not just the permissible tiles. I haven't fixed this yet, primarily because rectifying it demands an overhaul of the entire grid system. However, I'm already planning such a revamp when I delve into the dungeon mechanics we discussed in this video. I just thought I'd bring it up to show that the game development journey never truly ends. Speaking of a long journey, now I'll share my thoughts on the whole Unity controversy. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but for those out of the loop, Unity recently changed the pricing structure to charge a fee per install of any game that's built with Unity, once a certain threshold is met. I think it's safe to say no one is praising this change. And although I do admit this does kill a lot of motivation to keep using Unity for my game, I'm not going to switch. The first reason is because it would set me back so far to have to learn a new engine and move everything over. I also use a ton of Unity assets I wouldn't really be able to carry over. Plus, I doubt this game will even reach that $200,000 threshold. Don't get me wrong, I'd be happy if it did, but I'm not necessarily doing this with the primary focus of making money right now, but rather because it's something I enjoy doing and I want to see my creation come to life. After this game gets completed, I can take another look for my next game. Who knows, maybe I could build my own engine. Seems like that could be a fun challenge. That is all I had for this devlog. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with this project, and join the Discord if you have anything you want to share. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.